In this episode of Locally Owned, we're going to be interviewing Connoisseur Cigars. Now, during the COVID pandemic, a lot of businesses were affected, and most people don't realize one of the niches that actually increased in sales was tobacco. And I want to understand exactly what he did specifically for his business on one end, but number two, Kay, who we're going to be interviewing here shortly, is also the gentleman that I go to and buy my cigars from. Now, it's a very cool and unique spot in Gastown, downtown Vancouver. Kay's going to tell you about his background in cigars. This is a family-owned business. It's been around for a very, very long time. He's been able to take it over from his dad. So let's go meet Kay and understand what actually happened during these interesting times, and specifically to his business. Just like most businesses, he saw a bit of a dip, but then just because the sales took off, his businesses went the other way. So let's go meet Kay right now. This specific business is something that I come to and have supported throughout COVID. Sometimes I feel a little bit too much, but hey, we've become close friends now, so why not help close businesses? So Kay, welcome to Locally Owned.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely. So Kay, tell us a little bit about Connoisseur Cigars and kind of I know just over the weekend when I was here visiting, you told us a little bit of the history that I didn't know. So you guys were a bit down the road.
So originally our first location, we opened in 96. We were at 12 Water Street, so at the very beginning of the street where the Gassy Jack statue is. That was started by my father.
Okay.
That store was primarily our lounge location, so back when we could actually smoke inside cigars, the store, it made sense to have that location.
Yeah.
Around 99, we opened the second location, which is here.
Yeah.
And then we basically downsized to just this at around 2003, where we closed that one down where there was no smoking at all. I personally took over the business around 2006.
Okay.
So it's been year 14 now.
Coming up on running this bad boy.
Pretty much. And then it's been pretty interesting with the year that we have so far.
This specific year, like I mentioned in the intro, you know, we've seen some of the articles that are out there. There's one of the industries that went up in volume of sales was the tobacco industry. Now, there's one correlation that he brought up to why cigars went up, and we'll bring that up inside in a minute. That's actually a pretty cool correlation to why he thinks it is. So tell us a little bit about, you know, why your dad in the early days opened up the business, and now I guess it's a family-driven business. It's kind of kept the lineage for a decent amount of time.
Like for the most part, the reason we started was just demand. Like we were never really into cigars. My family always had gift stores on the street. So this street was basically known for like gift stores for the longest time. So if you're coming as a tourist, they have the steam clock here. People come by to buy souvenirs, etc. We just had so many people asking for cigars around like the mid to late 90s.
So you just saw a problem and wanted to fix it.
There's no cigar stores in town. And at that time, there was one other shop at the bottom of the street that was a pipe tobacco specialist. But very little on cigars. So we just saw the demand and we just started going from there. So when my dad started this, he wasn't even in cigars. He knew nothing about it, so he had to sort of pick it up as he went. Where when I started, I actually like knew before I took over.
So your dad started because of demand. So like most people in business, guys, the number one thing is, you know, figure out a problem, solve it. You've got yourself a business. That's pretty much what they did. Because right behind where, you know, the guys are shooting this right now, it's all gift stores, and you can buy like maple syrup and all the crazy Canadian goodies that you want to come if you're ever visiting Vancouver. They saw demand, turned it into a business. Now it's been around since 93.
96.
96, sorry. It's been around since 96, and here we're sitting in 2020. When I kind of started buying and coming buying cigars from you was just before the pandemic, and the pandemic happened, and then it was crazy. So what I want to do is I want to kind of jump inside the store, kind of understand a little bit about how your business changed. Obviously, this specific part of town in Vancouver is very touristy driven. Like the cruise ships like dock right over there, so it's like there was no tourists this year because no one could travel around the world.
You literally see them through this guy's window.
Yeah, right over there. It's true. So it's like this entire thing. You come here during the summers and it's cruise ship heaven. It's like majority of your business is during that time of year, and that affected you pretty heavily. So let's jump inside and talk about that. The whole point behind this entire series is for us to, number one, we're going to start this in Vancouver, where we're at right now. We're going to be showcasing a lot of these episodes to the Vancouver market. So yeah, tell us a little bit about Connoisseur Cigars and what you offer here.
So basically we offer anything to do with cigars and cigar accessories and sort of like gentleman lifestyle, which it comes to sort of like leather goods, pens, etc. And on top of that, like anything to do with cigars, which are like lighters, ashtrays, cutters, humidors, anything to sort of that you need to get into the cigar life.
Market, Now, one of the things that attracted me when I first came to kind of, buy cigars off you, you're in a kind of upper echelon niche that you're working with in the cigars. You're not just selling the everyday cigars for every single person. Behind us here is the beautiful humidor and the cigar room. And why did you guys choose to go down that route versus when you go into whenever I go into a different city, a lot of times I go buy cigars, they have everything.
So basically the reason we chose this route is when it comes to cigars, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of SKUs of cigars you can sort of get into that are
Purchase
very
and buy. Yeah.
sort of bottom of the row, starter cigar, etc. But a lot of stuff, if I don't like to smoke it myself, I don't like to offer it to clients.
Yeah.
So we're more boutique. Even the accessories we have, it's stuff that I personally stand behind.
Yeah. So it's stuff that you stand behind and stuff that you like. And also, I think it speaks for itself when you go after a certain demographic of people kind of selling the type of cigars you're selling. Like most places when I go, whether it's Hawaii or Vegas or whatever, you can kind of walk in and it kind of serves everybody.
Right.
You're trying to go after a specific niche, it looks like.
Not specifically, like we are high end, but at the same time, it doesn't particularly mean expensive.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to cigars, a lot of people have the misconception that it has to be expensive for it to be good.
Yeah.
But once you pick, for example, in the Cuban lines, one specific brand, price is just determined by volume of tobacco.
Right.
So if you pick a small version of that same brand, it will automatically just be less in cost.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it's going to be less in quality.
So quality is always the same. It just depends on how much tobacco you get in and out of that. And we're going to do a little segment later on in the video, specifically where you're going to kind of break us down and kind of some of the misconceptions, I believe, of smoking a cigar and enjoying the lifestyle, to say the least. Now, let's transition a little bit. So before COVID, every year business is good. Definitely. Give us a little bit of like pre-COVID and how business. Let's talk about like last summer, because we can correlate, I think, summer to summer.
Right.
So let's talk about last summer in terms of volume, sales, how like.
So basically, volume and sales, we were considerably higher last year compared to this year. One, we lost the tourists. We lost tourists from the cruise ships, which was thousands of people daily coming through.
Yeah.
So it wasn't specifically sort of like high-end clientele, but just pure volume, just the number of people that come through. This year, we've seen more sort of intimate clientele. Okay. So now we have more, like we have the capability to give one-on-one service, get to know the customers. I get to know, like, for example, just with yourself, I got to know you more, where like before, there's so much volume coming through, I don't have time to be like, my client Rohan, like...
This is what he likes, this is what he wants, kind of situation.
So like now, like this very small number of clientele, but then I get to know them.
Right, and it's turned more of a personal kind of, you've built a personal relationship, which I think long term will help the business a little bit more for you specifically.
It should, because once we get the tourism back, now we have the bond with the new clients, plus sort of like tourist clients are a little different because it's a little less personal. People sort of come, you see them one day, they're gone, but I'd rather build that long-term relationship with local bases.
And the efficient. I think the long term also, like, I think you're doing something pretty cool that's coming up in a couple of weeks, where it's like you're bringing two different businesses that are locally from the Vancouver market and kind of, educating the audience as well in kind of that realm. Now, tell us a little bit about, why you feel the tobacco sales, specifically in the cigar market, took off this year during COVID.
Yeah, as funny as it sounds, right around the time that this whole COVID thing started, it was that new Michael Jordan documentary. Yeah. Pretty much as soon as that came out, we had a huge influx of people wanting to just learn about cigars just because they watched
his documentary.
Just his documentary, and the fact that he enjoyed his cigars, and the fact that he's an athlete, and even at his prime, he was smoking cigars right before Game-7.
That's true. And you said he did the same thing in the cigar world during his last year.
He did, yeah. So it's funny how one person can impact an entire industry so indirectly, because he was just being filmed doing what he loves, and it moves an entire industry.
It's crazy. And it's like, and specifically for what Jordan has been capable to doing. And now he's got shoes that people are paying thousands and thousands of dollars for, which I don't understand. It's a whole different conversation. But so tell us a little bit in terms of, in the cigar world, you said specifically you saw a volume increase during COVID. Why do you think that was outside of the documentary?
I think it's mostly just abundance of time. Yeah. Like people had time. If they were interested in this, now they have the capability of sort of getting into it, understanding it, learning it. or it could be just people had nothing else to do.
Right.
So sort of finding things to do. There's no entertainment left, so people made entertainment at
by
home
themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely victim of that because I definitely started smoking a lot more cigars during COVID than I was before. And I think one of the things that I appreciated was even coming through during COVID here was like every single time it's like try this, see what your palate was like, and we kind of figure out now. And you touched on it, earlier where it's like even having that one-on-one time. It's like now I know specifically, okay, I don't like this type of a cigar, and you're like, okay, well, I got something new coming in, try this, or whatever.
Exactly.
And so you've been able to kind of build the business around more of a intimate setting. Now, let's transition a little bit into marketing. What have you been able to do to kind of keep your business going during COVID?
So the tough part with tobacco is we can't really advertise.
Right.
So we do have social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, etc.
Yeah.
But even within those channels, we can't advertise anything. So everything is sort of word of mouth, what people see, if they repost or post, etc.
And you've been, so even with word of mouth and through Instagram, and Instagram has been, I think that's how I found you guys, and originally was through Instagram. And one of the things you mentioned to me is it's worked really, really well, but it's also been kind of in a way where it's kind of been difficult for you guys to kind of understand and grow, because the clientele that you're going after right now specifically isn't too heavy on Instagram.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like either too old where they don't understand
being on the phones or
on the phones and Instagram and etc. Or if they are of the right age, then we don't have the proper marketing capability to reach them.
To reach them specifically. Now you're going down a route of partnering with a local Vancouver influencer in a realm, I guess you can call it, Jason. And what's like? Tell us, like, let's foreshadow, like, or future pace this a little bit. What are you hoping to get out of something like that for during these uncertain times still?
So basically, we're just trying to get the whole intimate events back into existence, because before everything had become massive events. We would partner up with a lot of local people, even last year where we would do the Deighton Cup,
right,
where it's thousands of people, very low when it comes to actual one-on-one. It's just provide a service, volume, you don't get to know anybody. And we found we weren't really getting much return after the fact, so people just don't notice that you're even there. But now we've been doing sort of more intimate one-on-one, like 15, 20 people max events where you get to talk to every single person who comes to your event. Yeah.
And I think that's really, really cool, because from a marketing perspective, which I do on a day-to-day basis, is when you do the intimate, on one end, you're building lifetime value with your end consumer. Because even though it's more intimate, it may cost a little bit more upfront, smaller audience, but long term, you're building a closer tribe of people that will bring people in when they're visiting into town or kind of going down that route. I think that's going to be a huge part of that.
It becomes more of like a friend relationship and not just client.
Yeah. You end up building more of a relationship than calling them a client at the end of the day, because like you'd hang out, smoke a cigar, go have a drink at any point, whether it was here or not.
Right. And in this industry, it's pretty much like it's a norm to become very close, intimate with your clientele, because you sit down, you share a cigar, there might be like dinners involved, drinks involved, and like
it kind of builds on it. And which is unique too, because you have another business that you do outside of it, outside of Connoisseur Cigars, and I'm sure the way you've been able to do it, I don't know how you've been able to do it with no staff here, which is still I can't wrap my head around, because you're telling me over the weekend. It's been interesting because I'm sure you probably found people that have come here that have turned clients there.
Exactly. So originally, like, we started off with this, but basically before COVID, when we actually had staff that we could have here, my primary profession became realtor. So I was in the real estate market, but then now I'm sort of juggling both. So I get zero free time.
And a kid. And a baby.
And a newborn.
I feel that pain for sure. You're constantly going with just a baby, right? So let's transition a little bit, because this one's a unique one. We've done a lot of marketing in locally owned, and kind of we can dig deeper and deeper with that. But what are some misconceptions for people that are in Vancouver that probably come and walk past your store plenty of times with cigars and don't understand it, but they just want to kind of get into the world, kind of so unravel that for us.
Sort of going back to what I originally covered, everything comes back to sort of price. Being a boutique, being a little bit smaller, when people walk by, I feel like they get that. And I've actually heard from people where they feel intimidated to come in. Where if I come in, I have to buy something, and it looks like it's going to be expensive, etc. And like I said before, like cigars, you can go with a very high-end brand. Get a smaller version of it, get introduced, and especially when you're first starting, what you want to do is make sure that you pick smaller. You don't want to be smoking like a 45-minute, 1-hour cigar
like
if you're not sure if you actually like the flavor or the actual strength of the cigar. Usually when people come in and like take that first step, I can introduce them to
Something
sort of
decent.
starting it off, taking notes, keeping track of the stuff they smoke, and more importantly, stuff that they don't like.
Yeah.
So they're not re-smoking these things.
Yeah.
And then within 6 months to a year, if you continue this, you'll sort of figure out your flavor.
A palate.
And then you have no real investment. So we have a lot of beautiful accessories. And some stuff can range in
the thousands.
But those are all sort of after the fact.
Yeah.
Like it's not necessary to start.
It becomes more of a collectible thing more than anything. Like even for me, I did start at the level of, having the collection that I've built now from coming here and buying from you. But it's like when I first got started into cigars, because a lot of my audience knows I grew up smoking hookahs and shishas, living in Dubai and stuff like that. And then eventually started smoking cigars with a friend, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of see this. There's like more of a culture. Then you start going to lounges, and you're like, okay, I understand why people do this a little bit more. And I met some really cool people at cigar lounges when I was in DC earlier this year at a cigar lounge. I met some interesting people inside of there.
Definitely meet great people at cigar lounges. And that's one of the shames of Vancouver, because we no longer have that capability of doing a lounge.
Yeah.
But anywhere I've traveled around the world, you walk into a cigar lounge, you've never been there before. And by the time you're done your first cigar, you've made 2 new friends.
Yeah. And just sitting there hanging out.
Just random.
And people know, and it's more of it's a very small culture, small tribe, and especially if you're smoking a good cigar and you know what you're smoking, it's like instantly people pick up on it, and they're like, okay, this guy probably knows what he's doing, let's have a chat and see. And people just want to kind of see, especially when you're a tourist in a new...
It's all like-minded people.
Yeah. And it's like a mini networking ground. And it's like playing golf. It's like you go play golf, you're networking with some people.
And when you're smoking a cigar, you sort of find a lot of time to think and sort of procrastinate with yourself.
Yeah.
And like some of the biggest decisions I've done
just
over a cigar.
Yeah.
You just sit down by yourself, you smoke a cigar, and within that hour,
you've worked out the pros and cons of whatever decision you need to do.
Good or bad, you figure it out.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the cigar world. We've got some stuff in front of us. Kind of educate us a little bit more.
Yeah, so basically this specific setup I have here is from a brand called S.T.Dupont. It's a brand out of Paris, France.
Yep.
So basically they're known as the top when it comes to cigar accessories.
Okay.
So anything they touch, it's nothing but the best.
Yeah.
And they have a full line, and it's not specifically just high-end for price, it's just quality. We have items from them that start sort of in like the very low hundreds, so very attainable, people can get into there. They have a good lifetime warranty on the product as well. So when you buy an item, you don't want to be continuously rebuying it over time. And what we have here is basically the 3 main items you need once you get into cigars. One is the humidor.
Yeah.
So this is what helps you keep your cigar at optimal humidity at home. So this will sort of artificially give you that climate that's in those tropical areas. The higher 70% humidity, we're not going to get here.
Never. Yeah.
And then aside from that, the outside is all aesthetic. So this one is hand lacquered, very
looks
limited, beautiful humidor. Definitely don't need to start at this kind of level, but this is sort of like a furniture piece after it gets to this. We have the cigar cutter. Even though you have many different varieties, this is the typical 2-blade cutter.
Yeah.
2 blades, cut the end off. Any cigar is capped on the end.
Yeah.
So in order to start smoking it, you need to take the top off.
Yeah.
And then this is just a lighter from the same company.
So you can build a full collection and make it all match. Look at that.
This is a very classic. So this one is actually a play on classic and new. So you do get the double flame.
Flames, yeah.
And also torch at the same time.
Okay.
So you got the new world
and
plus
the old school world. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Now, obviously, when you first when I first got started, my humidor was nothing like this. Pretty simple. I think it was like $100 or $150.
For the most part, as long as it's a good humidor with cedar, it's a perfect way to start.
And you just got to keep taking care of it.
Take care of it. It's sort of like a hobby. Yeah. So it's not something where you buy it and forget about it. Yeah. We have a lot of people who buy it, they take it home, and they don't even realize
what they need to do.
Yeah. So one of the things we do is we season it for them, we get them started, we walk them through it. And a lot of times we'll get calls like, my humidor is not working, what should I do, etc.
Bring it in, show them how to do it again.
It's sort of like getting into like the bonsai tree. I don't know if you've ever had a go at that. I've killed many of them. I like the concept, but I haven't put enough effort, and then no one's really taught me. So what we feel is like when somebody starts in this hobby.
It is a hobby. It's, no matter what you look at it, it is a hobby.
Exactly. So like getting the right steps. It's very simple once you get into it, but it's also very difficult if you have no clue what you're doing.
But it's also an education piece. When I first got into cigars, I was just traveling with, other business owners that would smoke cigars all the time. So I just let them buy it and I just smoke it with them. So like, I don't know what the hell I'm smoking in the first place. But eventually when you start to kind of get used to it, you're like, okay, then kind of educate yourself. And I think getting into any hobby, whether it's, smoking cigars or like I said earlier, golfing, or whether you do whatever you're doing, no matter what, any hobby, you've got to invest. If you're going to go golfing, you want a good pair of clubs. If you're going to go running, you want a good pair of shoes. If you can go road bike, you want a good road bike. So this correlation is there. And I think overall, one of the things that I like when investing in my theory in life is, once you're going to take something seriously, is take the time and invest in something that's going to last a long time.
Exactly.
And invest in quality so you're not buying over and over again. Because if things break, what the hell's the point?
It can easily add up to being more expensive in the long run.
Over time. Yeah. And like, yes, you may see a humidor that could get up to, in high, let's say $1,000 or north of that or whatever, which is pretty easy to get to. But it's like, that's going to last you 10, 15 years.
Because after a certain point, you're paying for the exterior, the aesthetics, what the finishing material is, does it have any kind of precious metals, etc. But once the box itself is right, the outside is not a big deal. You can get into those in the future if you become more serious. But at the beginning, you literally need a cigar. We cut it for you and a pack of matches,
and you're good to go. Yeah. Start small. It's like we'll just keep using golfing as a analogy. It's like when you start, you're just going to go to the driving range, and they're going to give you clubs and some balls and go hit a couple.
Figure it out.
Exactly. Figure out how to. So you're not Captain Hook over there. Sweet. So let's move. We're going to move into the room behind us and kind of get a little bit more education on cigars themselves. Because I've learned a lot from you specifically on just all the different kinds of cigars. I walked in here one day, I'm like, I don't know what I'm buying. The guys that I used to go traveling with would buy my cigars from me. Teach me. So let's go to the room.
Definitely.
What would you call it? Cigar room?
Humidor.
Humidor. This is an actual physical humidor. Okay. So now we're in the humidor. What you saw outside was one that you take home. This is when you get to real cool levels. You get to build one in your house eventually, maybe one day. So, okay, walk us through some of the different cigars and what we can learn, because I've learned an insane amount from you over the
So basically, when somebody walks in for the first time, they've never had a cigar, they say, guide us basically.
Yeah.
What we go over is three main things. One is strength.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. So we sort of see what kind of background, what kind of experience they've had with smoking.
Yeah.
When it comes to cigars, if you've never smoked, we start off at the very bottom. We go very low on the strength gauge.
Yeah.
And when it comes to strength in Cubans, it's not a taste thing. So the problem is it's very deceiving. So there's some brands, for example, like Partagas and Boulevard.
Yeah.
Very full-bodied, very strong, but you won't taste it. So you'll smoke it, it'll be your very first time. It'll be very smooth, it'll taste very delicious, but it'll hit you like a rock by the time you're done. And it gets you when you're not expecting
as it's getting lower.
You go. So it's more of like a lightheadedness, not taste.
Yeah.
So that's the problem with Cuban cigars. You can't really randomly pick and say, oh, if it feels too strong, I want to put it down. Because everything is going to be very smooth.
Yeah.
When it comes to the next step, it becomes size, so how long you want to smoke for.
Yeah.
Any cigar you pick, you want to finish it from start to finish.
Yeah,
so you don't want to pick a big cigar and say, I'll smoke half now, half tomorrow. Because you get rid of the whole point of the cigar, which is the final third, basically.
Okay.
So everything you do in the first, 3/4 of the cigar is building you up for the last end.
Huh, okay.
So,
that's interesting.
Basically, if you want to look at it in a good way, it's almost like taking a book.
Yeah.
If you take that book and only read,
3/4
all of it, and then take the last 2 chapters, rip it out, and throw it. That's what you're doing. Yeah. There's no point at all. So you want the finish, you want the conclusion of that cigar. So when it comes to that, you want to pick a cigar based on your occasion.
Okay.
So no matter how long you smoke for, I've been smoking for 16 years now.
Okay.
I can't tell you one cigar that I would pick over the other if you said just pick one.
Because they're all unique.
Because it's all unique depending on when I smoke. If I smoke earlier in the morning, I pick something a little bit lighter. If I smoke at night, I want a little bit heavy because I've just had a full meal. If you want to sort of mellow down. And then based on how much time you have. So if I only have about 15 to 20 minutes, I'll pick a smaller size cigar like this.
Okay, yeah.
And then you build this up. So this cigar will give you a different ending. But at the same time, if I only had 15 minutes and I pick a cigar like this that's supposed to last about an hour and 15 minutes, I'm not doing it any justice.
No.
And then we come back to the price thing again, because this whole row is the same brand, same quality across.
With different prices.
Just different prices. So you're just paying for volume of tobacco.
Right. Makes sense. So now, when it comes to more, let's just say, there's times when specifically when I'm in Hawaii, if I'm in Australia hanging out on the beach or something, I want to just sit there and drink a coffee first thing in the morning and smoke a cigar.
Right.
What's the difference? Is there a big difference in terms of why people choose certain cigars for coffee versus cognac.
So once it comes to pairing, it's a whole nother world.
Okay.
Because you want to make sure, like, what do you want to be tasting? Do you want the drink to be the primary sort of enjoyment of that sit down?
Usually
or
my
do you
morning
want the
coffees
cigar?
are my coffee. Yeah.
So then you want to pick something where like your coffee's not going to get overwhelmed.
Right.
So you pick something very light. So you go with something like the Romeo and Juliet on this shelf here.
Okay.
Very light, very mellow, very sweet.
Okay.
So the coffee will sort of overpower the cigar.
Yeah.
You're enjoying the cigar, but the coffee's not getting sort of
Taken over.
Yeah.
And these are some of the ones that you mentioned, I think, once before. They've also got like a sugarcane flavor.
Exactly. They have a very slight sweetness. Nothing is artificial. It's just happens to be a very high sugar content in the tobacco.
Now, when it comes to, let's say, like a shorter one or a longer one, have you seen preferences of people that have come in and said, I only want to smoke a 20-minute cigar?
Yes.
Or I only want to smoke an hour and a half cigar. You know, we were laughing earlier, it was like Winston Churchill always had a big honking cigar in his mouth. But it's like, what's personality style usually? Is just
It's
what
very
people
personal.
like? Yeah.
I have clients that won't smoke the same thing twice.
Really?
There's some people that they've been coming here for 10 years and they've only smoked one cigar and they won't change.
Just same one every
Creature
single
of
time.
habit.
Yeah.
And then that's why when it comes to cigars, you have to sort of trial and error yourself.
Yeah.
Because like when you'd go out with your business partners and they give you cigars, their favorite might be ones you hate.
I don't like, There's been times I'm like, what am I smoking? Like, but it's like, I didn't pay for it, I'm just going to enjoy it. Or it's like, sometimes I just put them down and I'm like, I can't.
And at the same time, your palate changes as well. So you might have had a cigar from them that you hated originally, but once you get into cigars, you start smoking for a year or two, and your palate starts opening up. You actually find that the ones you hated before are the ones you love. And I found personally, like this brand, it killed me when I first started.
Really?
Like I would refuse cigars because I'm like,
not doing it.
I'm not doing it. I don't like the taste. I don't like how it makes me feel.
Interesting.
I'm good. But then now they're one of my favorite cigars.
Yeah, that's what you mentioned outside of the two that were out there.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that, you know, when talking about palate and kind of building it up, and most like cigars is such a, like we said earlier, it is a, you know, a hobby. But building up your palate to a cigar is just like building up your palate to drinking wine. I think a lot of times when I first started drinking wine too, it was like, what is this? Just give me a beer.
Right.
Like it's just so much easier. But now I would choose wine over beer any day of the week.
Right.
But it's the same thing with a cigar.
Exactly. It's a very acquired taste, and it takes a lot of sort of dedication and effort.
Yeah.
Because right now cigars have that sort of aura around it, which is like graduation day, wedding day, bachelor party, just something to have in a picture.
Yeah. To make the picture look cooler than it needs to be, right? Now, when getting into that world of understanding, you know, like, let's say, for example, when you're smoking a cigar, do you suggest people having a chat when people is coming in here, or if people are watching this internationally, they're going into a cigar store there, obviously doing a little bit more research to what they're pairing it with? Or do you specifically suggest, like, you know, when, let's just say evening time, when majority of the time cigars are smoked, I think, like it's whatever, I'm usually doing it, like I'm only smoking in the morning if I'm on vacation. But it's like, is there ones that you suggest with a wine, like a red wine, or is it ones you suggest with like whiskey or a bourbon or something like that?
So for the most part, it's the primary note in the cigar that you want to pair.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be one specific cigar that's like, this is for wine.
Yeah.
But you want to make sure that the primary notes, whether it's sweet, whether it's like woody, whether it's leathery, it actually sort of works together.
Yeah.
So then, as I said before, you don't want it to sort of overlap. So if you take a very peaty Scotch, for example, and then you smoke it with the Romeo and Juliet, which is very light and sweet, you won't taste this anymore. So the Scotch is going to completely overwhelm it.
Okay.
And it's gone. And then if you're trying to learn about Scotch, no problem. Like the cigar is a secondary.
Yeah. It's just there for kind of
it's just the background. But if you're trying to learn about cigars and it's the first time you're smoking that cigar and you want to learn if you actually like it, doing that will
ruin it
because you're not getting
it's
the
more
right
of an experience-based thing. Now, with cigars, I know one of the things you mentioned earlier is like there's some that you've got that are like collector's editions almost. That we've talked about. What makes it kind of like, from what you see, like a quote-unquote average cigar that anybody can just walk in here and buy, to versus someone buying a full collection?
For the most part, it's just rarity.
Okay.
So some people collect based on just the fact that it's a yearly release.
Yeah.
And then some people collect because it's vintage.
Okay.
So a lot of times we'll have what you consider like a normal off-the-shelf cigar, but it happens to be over 10 years old. So anything over 10 years old is considered vintage.
Okay.
And once that happens, you're actually getting all the nicotine and ammonia that's slowly purged out of the cigars.
Yeah.
So you're getting just the tobacco.
Ah, okay.
So anytime you have that nicotine and ammonia present in the cigar, it gives you a very slight, like, sour pepper kind of flavor range.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah.
Some cigars, like the Partagas we spoke about, has that pepperiness to it anyways.
Okay.
So very hard to tell the difference between
This
a 10-year-old
versus-
version and a party gift. So you can tell, but very minimal.
Yeah.
But if you take a cigar that's very delicate, like Romeo and Juliet, or something that's very like lacking spice,
Yeah.
then you'll taste that spice that's not supposed to be there. And then as soon as you take a vintage version of that, it's suddenly
Completely.
night and day.
It's completely gone. Okay, that's interesting. Now, for specifically when people want to come in here and kind of buy a cigar off you or kind of understand, what do you suggest when people walk in? Because when I first messaged you, you kind of gave me like 2 of each and said try them out and come back. Is there ones where it's like, you have to try this, or
Not
I know you mentioned like
particularly.
palate, but it's like
For the most part, I like when we first spoke, I sort
Yeah.
of give you like a wide variety. So it was 5 or 6 brands,
Yeah.
completely different, 2 of each. So for example, if you want to smoke with somebody,
Yeah.
you can do
Share
that.
one with
and
them,
at the
yeah.
same time, if you weren't, you get to give that cigar a second chance.
yeah. And I think that's a smart way of doing it. The way I did it with him, because I was used to some of the American brands, as they would call it, for the cigars, because that's usually what the guys that I travel with would buy. And I was like, okay, well, I want to actually take this and kind of turn it into something I enjoy long term.
Right.
I'd rather invest in something good than there's nothing wrong with those brands at all. But I want to kind of just build the palate, and it's just like
Right.
starting where it's like if you're buying wine that's from a grocery store to versus if you go and buy a bottle
Right.
of wine that's been sitting and aged for a while.
Right.
So, sweet. Okay, well, thanks for this specific episode. Where
Definitely.
can people find you online? Like, are you on?
So for the most part, we're on Instagram.
Yeah.
So that's where we have most of our social media presence.
Okay.
And it's at Cigar Connoisseurs.
Yeah, at Cigar Connoisseurs. So there we have it, guys. This specific episode has been a very cool one for me because I've learned a lot from meeting Kay earlier this year and kind of building a relationship and kind of more of a friendship now. You understood the history behind what's going on behind some of the cigars. Reach out, because if you have any specific questions, and I know he's very, very educational on what he knows because he's been smoking cigars for like 16 years now. So I'm pretty sure you learned a thing or two, because I've learned an absolute ton. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Go give them a follow. All of the links for Connoisseur Cigars and Cigar Connoisseurs will be down below. Go ahead, hit them a follow. Go reach out to Kay. If you're in Vancouver, come on down. Right in Gastown, across from the clock. So if you live in Vancouver, you know where that is. Other than that, look forward to seeing you in the next episode.